So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you again for volunteering with us, Atlanta Legal Aid Grove Park Foundation, to help homeowners appeal their property tax assessments. Stacy will be going into this in much detail in just a moment, but I just want to reiterate first how important it is, the work that you guys will be helping us with, and also go over some logistics. So these one-on-one sessions, you're going to be working with homeowners, a lot of seniors, and others to go through this, what can be a complex process. And we know that property taxes are a big reason that people can get displaced from their homes that they've been in for many years. So this is a really important volunteer opportunity and just a program that we do to help keep these residents in their home amidst different, development, redevelopment projects, because the fabric of communities is very important to us. So thank you for your time. It really is important. And you will feel very direct impacts as you talk with a lot of the homeowners that you'll see throughout the different sessions. So thank you for your time. It is very important what you will be doing. So just quickly, logistics, we'll have the training today. It will be recorded if you have to drop off at any point. After 1 o'clock, we'll shift to the people that are helping with pre-research. So if you're not helping with that, feel free to log off. The sessions themselves, if you could please arrive no later than 15 minutes before the start time, that would be great. Please bring a laptop if you are able to, so you can walk through the appeal process with the homeowners. We'll have snacks and stuff like that available. And basically homeowners will come in, whether you're in person or doing the virtual session, and we'll pair you with them in different appointment times. You'll walk through the appeal if it's a good idea for them or not. Hopefully we'll have most of the pre-research done. There may be some walk-ins that we have to do it on the spot, but you'll learn about that today. And you'll just walk through the appeal process. It's pretty straightforward. Just make sure you get there a few minutes early and bring a laptop. I will send out a recap email with all of these details so you have it handy. And I think that is it for the Zoom session. You'll go into breakout rooms. In person, you'll just be at tables with the clients, but it's pretty straightforward. You'll get all these after the session, but feel free to ask us questions throughout.
Jen, this is Elizabeth Fairman from Equifax. Are you expecting our volunteers to be doing pre-research?
So not unless your volunteers want to. We have a very strong group of pre-research from Harry Norman.
Okay.
So I think they can take care of a lot of it, and we have a few people that will be doing it throughout as well. So if you have anyone or anyone on the call that is interested in doing pre-research, we do have sessions this Saturday, next Wednesday, and the following Wednesday. So we may need additional support, but it's certainly not required. So if anyone's interested, let me know if you haven't already.
Okay. I just wanted to clarify for the Equifax folks that
Sure.
that was not part of the initial ask. So
Nope.
perfect.
Nope, you're good to go. All right, Stacey, take it away.
Okay, let me share my screen. My cat is relocating, sorry. And okay, so today we're going to be doing a training for the volunteers who are going to be in these consultations. The objectives today are basically to help you figure out how to assist the homeowner so that you kind of know what to expect. So we're going to do it in kind of two parts with a bonus part. And sorry, the mail person just came, so maybe a little barking. So basically we're going to do it in two parts for the main part, and then we're having the bonus sort of the pre-research values piece of it. The submitting an online tax appeal, we'll actually kind of walk through what to expect in the form and what to look for. In researching values, we're going to dig into exactly how to do that. Again, hopefully most of the research will have been done and you'll have some information, but we want to make sure that you understand how it's done so that if you need to, check on some properties or do any additional research, you have the tools to be able to do it. And then the final piece of it is going to be a live demonstration of conducting the pre-research. So the first thing, before we get started on all that, I want to make sure that you know what to look for in the notice of assessment. hopefully you will have that. If not, I will show you in a minute where to find it online. But there's some key pieces you're going to want to look at and talk with the clients about in the notice of assessment. One is it's going to have the date that it was issued and the deadline. For the vast majority of people, that deadline is going to be August 1st. There may be some stragglers where they were sent, revised notices of assessment that may have a different date, but for everyone, if they file it by August 1st, they should be fine. So we want to stress that August 1st deadline wherever possible. You want to look at what it says about the homestead exemption status. If someone applied for an exemption before April 1st and the homestead exemption status says no, it may be that it's still just being processed, but they still want to go ahead and appeal that, because if it turns out that it's not just being processed, that it's been lost or that it's being denied, this is the chance to appeal. And so you don't want to lose that right. And if it turns out that it was just being processed and they get approved, they can always withdraw the appeal. It's no big deal. And so we want to do that. Also, if they are applying for an exemption beyond the basic exemption, there are a whole bunch of other exemptions for like seniors, people with disabilities, all these other things. If they were applying for any of those and the code that it shows is HF01, which is what's here, that is just the basic exemption. If it says, HF anything else, it's going to be one of these other exemptions, which may or may not be the right one. But at least it shows that they're getting an exemption in addition to the basic exemption. And if they're not sure that it's the right one, they may want to check with the assessor's office to confirm it is. But hopefully that will be okay. The next thing that you want to look at is the values. They give the previous year's values and this year's values. If there's a big jump, that probably is why they're coming to us. And so that's where you want to talk to them about the possibility of appealing it. Another thing that we'll factor into is the estimated taxes due. This down at the bottom. It's just an estimate. This is not a bill. This is not necessarily what they'll see on the tax bill when it does come out, but they have to decide whether or not to appeal before that tax bill comes out. So, so this is just sort of a way to kind of give them an idea of what impact that increase is going to have on their tax bill. The way they calculate this is they use the millage rate from last year and then the new value so that the person can compare, what the expected taxes are for this year to what was on the tax bill last year to decide whether or not there's a big enough increase that it's worth appealing. I will say, even if the tax implication isn't that big, just keeping the property from, increasing for 3 years, that could be enough to want to appeal it. But, these are things that you want to talk through with the client and see, if they want to appeal or not. A couple other things that are on here, the property ID number and the neighborhood code. These will come in handy later. The property ID number or parcel ID number is going to be something that you're going to need to put on the application. And then the neighborhood code is, rather than saying that someone lives in Cascade Heights gets divided up into these smaller neighborhood codes, and they have a 4 or 5 digit number associated with them. And those are the neighborhoods that the tax commissioner's office the tax assessor's office is using to determine what neighborhood the property is in, and they're comparing that house to others in that same neighborhood code. So when you're looking at comparisons, you want to try and keep within that neighborhood code if you can. Okay. The other thing I want to say, just as a preliminary, is that there are 3 grounds for appeals. So you want to be keeping these in mind as you're talking with the client. The first is uniformity. This is a fairness argument. The tax assessors are tasked with uniformly assessing the properties. The taxes should be fair. So any similar houses should be given similar values so that the taxes are similar. If someone's property is is given too high a value, where, you know, other similar houses are much lower, they're being taxed higher than those other similar properties, and that's just not fair. So for uniformity, you're going to be looking at what does the tax assessor say the other properties in the neighborhood are worth for this year. Value is the second ground for appeals, but there are two different pieces of that. You know, there are two different ways that you end up with a value appeal. One is based on the condition of the property. You know, either that the information that the tax assessor has about the property is incorrect, or that there's problems with the condition, you know, the repairs that are needed, structural damage, anything that would affect the fair market value of the property. And then the other piece of value appeals is looking at sales in the neighborhood. So, you know, the condition piece of it is just looking at the client's house individually. The sales is comparing the house to other properties in the home, in the neighborhood that sold within the last year. And the sales that you're going to be looking at are going to be 2021 sales. Anything that happened after January 1st is going to be factored into next year's assessment. So you want to remember that uniformity is this year's values, sales are last year's sales. And then the third ground for appeal is homestead exemption denied. And this is just pretty straightforward. If they applied for an exemption and it's not showing up on the notice of assessment, then they want to appeal that. They're going to end up needing to show that they are eligible for it. You know, it's more straightforward than the other grounds for appeal. Okay. Submitting the appeal. First, again, the deadline is August 1st. That is going to be something you really need to stress to the people. If you know, the goal here is that you'll actually help them do an online appeal. You'll go all the way through it, hit submit, get the confirmation, and they're done. If that happens, we don't have to worry about the deadline because all of our sessions are before August 1st. If the person is going to finish it on their own, or if they're planning on either mailing or walking in the appeal, then you need to make sure they know that it has to be in by August 1st. So you know, really stress that deadline to them. Okay. So how to locate the appeal form, either the online or the paper form. You're going to go to fultonassessor.org. This is going to be the website that we use for most everything. And on there, they have, you know, on their little menu, there's a appeals. And if you hover that, it'll bring up property appeals. With that, you're going to go over to methods of appeal. And the first one is online filing. You scroll down and you'll get to the online filing. You click that to go into the online appeal process. And that's going to be probably the most common one that y'all are going to be using. Now, some people may want to do a paper form, and I think we'll have some on hand for the people who are in person. If that's the case, they can find the online, the PDF of the appeals form, just scrolling farther down on this page and clicking on the 2022 appeal form. That form is going to look like this. Now we've gone through and highlighted the key information. I've circled the things that, you know, in particular that are going to need to talk with the clients about. And again, I don't really expect them to be doing the paper form. I think that they're coming to us to try and get help with doing an online appeal. But sometimes it's good to just know what this form looks like and what the information is. A couple of key things. They're going to need to specify the grounds for the appeal. And so you see that I've got circled value, uniformity, and exemption denied. Again, those are the three grounds for appeal. They need to click every one that applies. So if they think that they have an argument for uniformity but not value, then they check the uniformity. If they might have both, check both. If they have exemption denied, you check that one. And if that's in addition to the others, you check that. Now I'll say on the paper form, you can check all three. there's going to be a slightly different way of doing it in the online, and I'll talk about that in a minute. They don't have to do it to check one of the boxes for who's going to hear the appeals, but I recommend that they do the Board of Equalization. The reason for that is that it can hear all appeals and there's no charge for it. So that's the one that we recommend checking. The billing preference is, we recommend 85%. If they don't put anything, it's going to be the 85%. And what that means is that once they appeal, it's not going to be resolved by the time the tax bill comes out. So the tax bill they get is going to be a temporary tax bill. And that temporary tax bill, unless they check the 100%, that temporary tax bill is going to either be last year's value or 85% of this year's value when they're calculating how much the taxes are. And so that way, basically while they're waiting for the final decision on the value, the county can still collect taxes, but not that recognize that there is this pending dispute about the value. They need to keep in mind that if they do check the 85%, or if they don't check anything, the temporary tax bill is probably going to be based on last year's value. And most likely the outcome is going to be a little bit higher than last year's value. So what that means is that when you get the final bill, or when you get to the end of the process, there's going to be a final bill sent, and that final bill may have some additional taxes owed. So I always advise the clients to go ahead and be saving some money so that they're ready for that bill. That tax bill that comes out at the end, the final bill, is going to be like any other tax bill, where it's going to send them a bill saying you owe this money and giving them 30 days to pay it. So, and then at the end of the 30 days, then there'll start be some interest and penalties accruing, but they want to be ready to pay it within that first 30 days. The big thing that y'all are going to be doing is this last circle, which is the owner's opinion of value. This is where, we're trying to help the client figure out what value they need to assert on the appeal. And you want to try and do it as something that they can justify. You want to lowball it, but you want to have it something that they might reasonably be able to provide evidence to support this lower value. It's, in some cases it's easier than others. Okay. So the nuts and bolts of submitting the online appeal, again, you click on the online services button. That's going to take you to the online services page, which has a link to SmartFile, and SmartFile is the system that they use. So you go there, and if the person already has a login, which they might have appealed in the past with when the county was using this system, or they might have filed a homestead exemption application using this system. So if they have a login already, they can just put in the email address and the password and log in. If they've forgotten the password, the forgot password allows you to have the password emailed to the email address, or a reset thing. So it's real easy to reset the password if they've forgotten it. If they have not ever done anything on the SmartFile system, then they do need to create an account, and creating an account does require an active email address. They're going to have to click on, you go to an email, get an email, and click on the link to be able to activate the account. So if you're going to create the account, it's going to ask you for the email address that they're going to use, and it's going to go ahead and ask for a password, and then you'll click register. Once you have clicked the register, it's going to automatically send that email to the email address. So the client is going to need to actually be able to access that email address, open the email, click the link, and activate the account. So once they get the email, it's going to, they'll click a link, and that's going to take them to this page. So if you're doing it on your computer, it'll come up with this page. You just click the, I'm sorry. So this is the page that tells them that it's going to be sent. The next thing they're going to get, once they click the link in their email, it's going to bring up this page. And again, if you're doing it on your computer, it's going to be easy. You just click here and it'll take you to the login page. If they're doing it remotely or on their phone or, you know, whatever, then basically once they, you know, click the link and gotten to this page, you can just go back to the login page and log in using the email address and the password that they've already set up. Once you're in, you're going to go to available filings and look for appeals, residential and commercial real estate or real property. Click on that, begin filing. And then you're going to insert the property ID number. So again, this is important to get that number. The number that they're asking for in this, they don't want it with all the dashes and stuff that you have in the notice of assessment. What I find easier is to just copy it from the Fulton Assessor's website when we pull up their property, and I'll talk about that in the next section, and then paste it in. But you can also type it in, and basically if it doesn't pull up the property that you're looking for, then you just need to keep playing with it until you get to the right format where it does pull up the property. And it's going to, once you've entered it, it'll bring up search results, and you'll pick the property that you're looking for. Click start filing. And then at this point, you're going to be just going through the pages. The first one is just to verify that you've got the right property. You're going to click next. And then you're just going to work through all the pages. Now, I will say these screenshots are from a few years ago. There are some little differences. For example, one thing that they now ask is whether or not you want a virtual or in-person hearing. So those aren't going to be in the screenshots, but just know that it's there, and there may be some little variations from what you're seeing here. It's going to ask whether the filer is an agent or the owner. You want to confirm that you are acting on behalf of the owner. That is not a neighbor or something like that. You want to make sure that you've got the authority of the owner to do this, because basically what you're doing is you're assisting the owner in filing the appeal for themselves. Do not click agent. You are not their agent. And even if you're going to take on representing this person all the way through to the Board of Equalization, the only way you can click agent is if you're already registered in the assessor's system as an agent. So it's just easier to do it as owner. Again, we're doing this just as an extension of the owner, not as the person who's going to represent them in these hearings. You're just going to work through the pages, verifying the information and answering the questions that are there. This is the big piece of what we're doing. And this is the same as what we talked about on the paper form. It's going to go through and ask you for the grounds for appeal, whether they want to do it as the Board of Equalization, what the value is being asserted, and whether or not to bill at 85%. So you're going to go through all that with the client. The one big difference between the paper form and the online form is that they have decided that you actually have to file separately for homestead exemption denied appeals versus appeals of value or uniformity. So if the person is going to appeal the homestead exemption denied and value and or uniformity, they're going to need to submit 2 separate appeals for that. So what they'll do is when it gets to the question of grounds for appeal, if you click yes, the homestead exemption denied, it's not going to give you the option of doing a value or uniformity appeal. And so what you want to do is say yes, go all the way through the form, get all the way to submit, click submit, just based on the homestead exemption appeal. All the answers should be geared towards that. And then once they hit submit, go back to available filings, do the real property appeal file selection again, and go back through the process. This time, when you get to the grounds for appeal, say no to homestead exemption denied, and that'll give you the option of choosing value and or uniformity. And so you'll put those down and go through the whole form again with the information for the value appeal.
Hey, Stacey, we have a couple questions.
Okay.
You want to get to those. Okay, so the first one, relevant to what you're doing now, is what if the owner's name is different from what's on their tax assessment, like the previous owner's name?
I go ahead and go through it. They may need to, between now and when they actually go to the Board of Equalization, they may need to just, verify that they are now the owner and that they're the proper party. This especially comes up when the owner is deceased. And, if the owner they have of record is still living, they can get a letter of authorization just in case. If the person's deceased, you can't get the authority of the record owner. And I've never had a problem with just explaining to the Board of Equalization that this person really is the proper owner, and allowing me to go ahead and do the appeal. But for purpose of this, what you're doing is just verifying that the person you're dealing with has that ownership interest. Whether it's actually the name that's appearing or not. That makes sense?
Yes. So we have a couple of questions that you may get to in a second. So you can defer if you need to. So one is about the appeals for the value argument now that homes are selling for, a lot more with the current market.
Yeah, I'm going to defer on that. So I think that we can talk about that a little bit more when we get into the research piece of it. The way we set this up is a little bit backwards. That we would normally do the research and then come through and do the actual appeal. But because of the way these consultations get set up, the main part of what y'all will be doing is the online appeal. So we start with that, and then we do the research section of this training afterwards. But I'll talk a little bit more about thinking through things that might be able to help if the sales don't help with the value.
So if you're not doing pre-research, but you're interested in learning more, please feel free to stick around. Is there a chance of the tax? Sorry, go ahead.
There is the research section that I would like everyone to stick around for before we get to the pre-research demonstration.
Yeah, that's a good point, because we may have walk-ins. We're going to try to have most of the pre-research done ahead of time with comp identified to make it go smoothly, but we will get some walk-ins. So you may have to do a little bit of research. So good point. This is a good question that we should address, is if there is a chance that taxes could be raised based on the base of the value that is provided, but I would say about the whole appeal process generally.
Yeah, so there is a law that says that the end result of an appeal cannot be more than what's in the notice of assessment. And that's going to be the case for almost everyone. The only exceptions are going to be if the home sold in the prior year. That's a separate statute. So if the home sold in the prior year for more than what's in the notice of assessment, then they can increase it to the amount of that sale. So there's a danger if you try to appeal, having basically established the fair market value yourself, you may get saddled with that, and so you may want to. The client may want to leave it alone if the notice of assessment is less than what they paid for the house. The other place where there's a danger of it increasing is if the person appealed within the last 3 years and is the value that's on the notice of assessment is the frozen value, then the appeal basically removes that freeze, and so at that point, they can increase it to, whatever they think the fair market value is, based on the overall process. So those are the places where it's a danger. Otherwise, the highest it's going to go is the notice of assessment. So there's not a whole lot of risk, and they end up with a freeze for 3 years. So it's not going to go up for the next 2 years. And that, that in itself can be a win. Any other questions?
I think in the interest of time, we can keep going. I always underscore this last point about the 85% of the bill. Just make sure you remind the client if they select that option that they will likely get another bill later on for the remainder amount. I often get calls at like a few months from now saying, why did I get another bill? So just remind them of that.
Yeah, and it's important just that they should be saving for it, because there probably is going to be an increase, even if they win, they can win, but if the a value that we're asserting is more than last year's value, then it's probably going to be a little bit more owed. Okay. So in the online form, there's a space for comments. So actually, there's also that on the paper form. I just didn't highlight it. In the online filing, there's this reason for appeal or comments. And this is where you can just give a short statement of, I think that my value should be lower because, and it can be, detailed as, these properties are valued lower, or it can just say, other properties are valued lower. Anything the truth taken into account. It doesn't hurt to have something here. If you don't want to have anything here, you can just, you can actually just leave this blank if the person doesn't want to put anything. But, again, just a very short statement is it doesn't hurt. There's also a page in the online appeal for attachments, and this is where you can upload like pictures that they have or other documents that if they have something. This is we can log in later and go to my filings and have the bulk of the appeal completed, and just go into that, upload the attachments, and do the submit on their own. But if they're going to do that, they need to understand that they have to hit that submit by August 1st. They can't just forget about it. They can't just say, oh, well, I started the appeal before August 1st. If they don't hit the submit, they haven't appealed. So again, if they're going to do that, stress the deadline. But they also let them know that they don't have to. You don't have to attach anything at this point. There is no need to put in evidence. You can if you want to, but you can also just leave it and then be ready to submit the evidence at the time of the equalization hearing. Be sure that they are going to make you verify that you really did mean to hit it. So, be sure that you say yes, that you really meant to hit submit, and make sure you get to the confirmation page. If you don't get to the confirmation page, it is not submitted. So it's really important you get to this, and then woohoo, you filed the appeal. That doesn't happen on the real thing. Once you've submitted it, it's going to immediately send a message, and you see the one at Message Center. That's the message saying, congratulations, you filed your appeal and it's being considered. They will also send an email to the email address. You want to make sure the client got the email and is saving it, or has the Message Center message printed, or the client. But you want to make sure that they have some proof that they actually did file, preferably something that shows the filing ID number. The Message Center message is going to have the date on it, so that's a great one to have. But they want to have some proof that they actually did file it and when they filed it. I also recommend that they print the filing. You can see the button that says print filing. You can actually print it as a PDF and send it to them. It's good to have that, because from the date that they submit their appeal, it's going to be months before they actually have a hearing. Even the early ones are probably going to be September, October. So it's going to be a while before they have the hearing, and it's helpful to have that record of what it is you said originally, to give you the, the basis for developing the case for the Board of Equalization hearing. They can also come back later and look at things. They can come back and look at the message center is going to have the record of messages sent. They can also go to my filings and they should be able to pull up the appeal through that. But again, just in case, I always make sure to print the filing so that they have that, outside of having to log back into the system. Okay. We're doing online appeals. That's going to be our main goal. Occasionally, we may help somebody with doing the paper appeal. So I want to make sure that y'all know where those go. But the main thing is going to be the online appeals and save the confirmation page. If they do want to do a paper appeal, they can mail it in. But if they mail it, it has to be postmarked on or before August 1st. And that's postmarked. If you bring it to the post office on August 1st, it may or may not be postmarked that day. So, so it's really important that however they mail it in a way that they can prove the date it was sent and that it was received. Because, if the assessor's office doesn't get the appeal, it's not going to do much good. I also recommend that people keep a copy of it. A lot of times they just, stick it in the mail and they go, well, we're on our way. And if they don't have, a copy and proof that they actually sent it, if it doesn't get registered, then there's a real problem. Similarly, they can take the paper appeal in person. They can go to the main address, which is here, or to any of the annexes. So, any of the service centers this, in this list. If they do take it in, again, they want to get some sort of proof that they submitted it, and preferably a copy of what they submitted, so that they know that it was received, on that date, and they can prove it if it somehow gets lost later. But hopefully they'll be doing the online appeals with y'all. Once you've got the thing submitted, or you're at the stopping point, it's a good idea to kind of run through what comes next. So I just want to run through that with y'all. So we're here at the 45 days after assessment date. We're getting close to that. So, again, that's going to be August 1st. The next thing that's going to happen is probably their tax bill. They may get a letter confirming that their appeal has been received, but it's not going to have any, that's basically just confirming that they got it. That's not going to be any action on the appeal. When they get the temporary tax bill, they do need to pay it. They can't wait till the end of all this to pay it. There's, if they don't pay that, there is going to be penalties and interest that accrue while the appeal is pending. The first thing they're going to get back as a decision on their appeal is actually going to be from the assessors. It's not going to be the Board of Equalization. Basically, once they receive the appeal, the assessors go back and they decide whether or not they want to stick with the value that they said, which is a no change, or if they want to change the value. And so what they'll get is either a no change letter that just says in really weird language that they're not changing the value and that the appeal is being certified to the Board of Equalization. If they see that it says that the appeal is being certified to the Board of Equalization, they don't need to do anything. If they get a change letter, and the change letter is going to look a lot like the notice of assessment that they already received, that change letter only has 30 days to appeal. So once you get that, they have to decide if they're going to appeal within 30 days. And it's not going to be, a big push like this. They're going to have to, get that and decide within 30 days and submit in writing that they do want to continue to the Board of Equalization. If the change letter has a value that they are willing to accept, what I recommend is that they reach out to the appraiser and see if they can get the 3-year freeze with that value. And if they can reach that agreement and get it in writing, get an email or something in writing that says that they're going to get that freeze, then they can leave it. They don't need to appeal to the Board of Equalization. If they can't get that freeze, then they may want to go ahead and appeal to the Board of Equalization, just so they know that they get the freeze, even if they end up trying to agree to that value again later. The Board of Equalization hearing is it's going to be scheduled sometime later. They kind of start generally, I think they do try and start having the hearings in August. Most likely it's like September, October when they really get started. And they're still doing hearings well into the following year. They're actually still finishing up the 2021 appeals now. So, it can take a long time to get to the hearing. So, make sure they understand that it's a long wait. But anytime they get something that relates to this, they're welcome to call us and talk through what they need to do, if anything, when they get whatever it is they get. Okay, just real quick, the 180-day rule. From the date that they submit the application, the Board of Assessors has 180 days to make a decision, basically 180 days to make the change or no change decision. And if they're not going to do it within that 180 days, they do have the option of adding another 180 days because almost always Fulton has more than 3% of the digest appealing. But they do have to give a notice to the person that they're taking that extra 180 days. And so they're going to have to give that notice at least 30 days before the end of the 180 days, which means that it's a good idea for the client to sort of count out where is the 180 days and then come back 30 days and just make sure that they get something in that time frame. If they don't, then they can actually argue that the value that they asserted in the appeal should be given to them. And in fact, if they wait until it's a Board of Equalization hearing, they can also argue that it should be given to them and frozen for 3 years. So it's worth knowing when that deadline is. Just a real quick recap and this is something you can kind of run through with the clients. This is their chance to argue to reduce the value, which then reduces the taxable value. This is their chance to present evidence for why the value should be lower. So they need to be sure to try and gather that evidence before the Board of Equalization hearing. The Board of Equalization is not scary. It's just 3 taxpayers sitting at a table with the client and an appraiser arguing for the value. If the client does want representation, we can consider whether or not to represent them at the actual hearing once it's scheduled. And a lot of that's going to depend on if we have volunteers available to do that. So again, even if they lose, they do get a 3-year freeze. And with the values going up and up and up, that's often a big win in itself. And they can appeal again at the end of that 3-year freeze. Again, stress that the deadline is August 1st. So that's the spiel on actually submitting the application. I'm going to go into researching and what information you're looking for and things to be thinking about when you're talking with the client about appealing. But are there any questions about the actual nuts and bolts of filing the appeal?
There aren't any in the chat. I would just mention that you will get a step-by-step guide. We'll print them off for you at your session, and it'll be in the email to walk you through all of these steps.
And we'll have a few of us on hand to answer questions and problem solve if any problems occur. Okay, so researching the values. Again, a lot of this is going to be done as the pre-research, but I think it's still good for you to have just a basic knowledge of how this is done so that if you need to dig a little bit more, or if there's a walk-in, or if you just need to be able to talk with the client about what went into these, I think it's good to have this just sort of a basic knowledge of it. Again, FultonAssessor.org website is going to be the key for all of this. They actually have a quick link for property search. You click on that, it brings you to a variety of search methods. The first thing you're going to want to do is pull up the client's home. So you're going to want to search, either owner search, parcel search, which is the property ID number, or address search to be able to pull up the individual property. And with that, the search is their system is a little persnickety. So for example, the owner search is last name, first name with no comma. And if they're co-owners, it usually just in one name, and you have to know which name they have as their first one. So it can be kind of persnickety, but if you run into a problem with one, you can try one of the others. Address search is usually the one that I go to. I put in the number and then just part of the name. So like if, if the name of the road is like Apple Valley Green, I'll just put like Apple Valley. And I never put street, drive, whatever. There's still some persnickety things to it. If you run into problems, holler and we can try and help problem solve that. One thing that often comes up is that, like, let's say the name of the street is McDonough. They would do it MC space D instead of, MCD. So, little tricks like that can come up. But usually you can problem solve and find the right one. Advanced search is going to be something that allows you to search multiple properties, and it's going to be really crucial for the pre-research. So I'll run through that, but the first thing you're going to be doing is looking for the client's home. Once you pull up the client's home, you're going to actually want to go through the information that they make sure actually pull up the notice of assessment once you get to their property information. It's over here. It's the 2022 real estate notice. You click on that, click go, and it'll allow you to download the notice of assessment and be able to look at it. Most of the information that's in the notice of assessment is also going to be, in the various tabs on the property assessor's website, but they're not going to have the estimated tax. That's the one piece that the notice of assessment does give you. Otherwise, that has the parcel ID number, it has the neighborhood code, it has all sorts of just basic information just on this profile page. And what I say is just click through each of the tabs and, let the client see what they have about their home and make sure it's correct. One of the ones you're really going to want to focus on is the residential tab. That's where it's going to have all the information about the house or the condo. And that's really where you're probably going to find things that may not be accurate. So you want to look at like the year built. Living area is the square footage of the house. If that is overstated dramatically, then that's a good ground for appeal. You want to look at the number of bedrooms, bathrooms, any sort of accessory buildings they have. The CDU is condition, desirability, and utility. And that's sort of a ranking anywhere from uninhabitable, very poor, all the way up to excellent. And so, if the person's home is rated as excellent and there's some condition problems, then, that's the place where they can argue that, my house is not worth what you say because it's not in the condition that you say it's in. Grade is it makes it sound like they're actually, giving like school grades to the houses because they really are from, A+ down to like D-. But what that is based on quality of construction and materials. And so that one's a little bit harder to argue with, but you might be able to get them to waver a little bit.
Hey, Stacy. We're having some internet issues between the two of us. If you want to maybe turn off your video, it may help with some of the lag that we're getting.
Okay, let me try. Okay. Can y'all still hear me?
Yes.
And let me make sure I can go to the next screen. Yes. And y'all can see the next screen, right?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So what you want to do is click through all of the different tabs just to make sure that all the information is correct. Some of it's not going to be relevant, but just click through it and see, and go through it with the client. Is the information accurate? Do they have the right square footage? Is the quality of construction seem correct? the condition desirability utility, if there is any damage, especially water or structural damage, that's going to have a real impact on the CDU. So, you know, help them think through if there are conditions that would affect that. Again, look at the accessory buildings. If it shows that there's a garage there and there's not a garage, you know, it was torn down years ago, then that can really make a difference in the value of the property. If it doesn't have, or if it's showing incorrect information about the heat and air, then that can affect the value. Also, the number of bedrooms, bathrooms, finished basement, those sorts of things. Those all affect the value of the property. Now, I will say if it's showing things that what it's showing is less than what the client actually has, you don't have to disclose that the value should be higher. And so, and if that's the case, you want to be a little bit careful about, you know, arguing condition issues. But if there are real condition issues, and this is pretty common, that, you know, a lot of the people we're dealing with have been living in their homes for generations, and, you know, things need to be fixed. So a lot of times there are condition issues that will help you be able to argue that, you know, my house is not anywhere near as valuable as that house down the street that was renovated and sold. And so, you know, the conditions can really make a big difference in both, you know, in the value arguments. If any of this information is not accurate and it would speak to a lower value, definitely talk to the person about doing a value appeal based on that. The other thing you want to do as you're doing this is gather the information about the client's home so that you can compare it to other homes, you know, in their neighborhood. And this is going to be, you know, important for the, you know, even with the pre-research done, is going to make a big difference to already have that information in front of you. So what is similar? Two homes that are identical are clearly similar. I mean, you know, that's easy. But a lot of our clients, you know, are in homes that are not necessarily the same as the other homes in the neighborhood. And there's just no way to argue that those are equal. But you can make an argument that they're, you know, they should be treated the same. I mean, the big rule in real estate is location, location, location. And if they are in the same location, then you can look at the price per square foot. So look at, you know, take the value of the home you're comparing it to and divide it by the square footage of the home you're comparing it to and get that price per square foot. And then you can multiply that by the square footage of your client's home and say, hey, wait, you know, this home sold for more than my client's value. But if you look at what they paid per square foot, it would actually speak to a lower value for my client. So that's, you know, it's sort of a way to allow different size homes and, you know, other variabilities to be made a little bit more similar. So when we're doing the research, you're going to be looking for different things, whether you're doing uniformity or value research. For uniformity, you're going to be looking at the appraised value for the current year. One way to do that is to click around on the map. And this is, you know, if you're doing it with the client there, this can be kind of a fun thing to do. Basically, if you click around on, if you go to the map tab on your client's property, it's going to bring up a map that has your client's property actually highlighted. And then you can click on any of the other properties and it's going to bring up a little box that gives some basic information about that property. And if you want to see more about it, you can click on the parcel ID and that'll bring up the information on that property. And basically what you want to do is just sort of click around, see what you can find. If you can find others that have lower values, then yeah, you found the Easter egg, you know. Yeah, there's certainly a lot of, well, in many neighborhoods, there are some undervalued properties that can be really helpful when you're doing this kind of research. Some neighborhoods, not so much. The way that the pre-research is going to be done probably is going to be using the advanced search. The advanced search is just this miracle cure. Basically, you go to advanced search you look at the criteria, and it has a whole list of things that you can use to search by. So when you're doing the uniformity search, you want to start with the neighborhood code. Probably if you put in the neighborhood code and just hit search, it's probably going to come up with too many hits. So you're probably going to need to narrow it in some ways. And so, some common ones are using the appraised value, square footage, the year built, and using a range. You want to try and gather as many comps as you can, but limit it to something that you could reasonably look at. They do have a limit of 250 that it'll come up with, and then if you're going to export it, it's an even smaller number. So you want to try and limit it, but without excluding those Easter eggs in there. For value research, you're going to be looking for sales for the prior year. Again, so you'll be looking for 2021 sales. Again, advanced search. This time you're going to use neighborhood code and sales date. You limit the sales date to January 1st, 2021 to December 31st, 2021. So that you capture all the sales during that time. That may be enough, depending on how many sales there were in the neighborhood, to get it down to what you can reasonably look at. If not, then you can add other criteria sort of one by one. I usually do sales price and go ahead and do like a bottom sales price of like 10,000, because that way you get rid of all the people who, just transferred an interest to their spouse or, a deed of gift or that sort of thing. So all the zeros will get knocked out. And then do, some huge number for the upper end, just so that I get all the real sales that eliminate some of them. And that sometimes is enough to bring it down to what you can look at. Once you've got what you're looking for, it's going to come up with a list that looks like this, or similar to this one. So what I did with this list is I actually clicked show and results, and I added sales price and square footage. Again, I gave a huge range so that I could try and get every sale there was, but this would allow me to just eyeball this list for the price per square foot that I'm looking for. And then you can click on the line and go to that property. It'll pull up the property information for that property just by clicking on the line. But the truly remarkable thing about the advanced search in Fulton County is you can actually download it. Just click select all. If you've got the numbers down low enough, you can select all, hit attribute export and go, and it'll actually allow you to download it as a spreadsheet. And when you open up that spreadsheet, it is just wonderful. Instead of having to click on the individual properties, it actually goes ahead and gives you a bunch of additional information. So it gives you the number of bedrooms, bathrooms, square footage, all of this great information for you to use to compare. The other great thing is if you're in a spreadsheet, you can actually add a price per square foot column. So I actually usually add both a sale, if it's the sales search, I'll add a sales price per square foot where I, divide the sale price by the square footage. And then I also do a appraised total price per square foot where I use the appraised total, which is the total value the assessor thinks it is worth, divided by the square footage. And then you can sort by that. So you can actually have in mind, what range your client's in, and only look for the ones that are going to help argue for a lower value. So it's just wonderful. So you can go through that, sort it, compare the properties, look at the various, key pieces like the year built, the bedrooms, bathrooms, number of stories. Look at these and look for similar homes that have a lower value. It just makes the search thing so much easier. And really, the pre-research that you have is kind of going to look like this. And so this is what you're going to be sort of eyeballing with the client to try and pick out which properties give the best argument for a lower value. you may still need to go and check each individual property for different things. For one thing, if you're doing a uniformity search, you want to try and make sure that you're not using a low value that's only low because it was appealed in the last 2 years, and so it's a frozen value. Or for sales, you want to make sure that it's not that, it was an uninhabitable house that was sold. So you may still need to go back and look at some of these properties, which again is why it's good to have an idea of how to do it. But you can use sort of eyeball this to help figure out which properties are good comps for your client. And then that can help you figure out what the value should be in asserting the value. I always say do it on the low end when we're doing it here. They can actually, when it comes time for the hearing, they can decide that, you know what, I would have a hard time really convincing the Board of Equalization to go as low as what's in my appeal. I'm going to argue for something a little bit higher, and that's fine. Nobody's going to go back and check what the value was from the original appeal. So for sales, you can also look in the map at sales. When you're clicking on a property, it has a sales tab and it'll give the recent sale information. And then if you see something that sounds promising, you can click on the parcel ID. But again, advanced search is just a wonderful source of information. You can make it work. So I'm going to mention QPublic to y'all because in some ways it's so much easier that, it has some certain advantages, but it used to be that I could just say, Google Fulton GA QPublic and boom, you can find the link to this website, to the search page. Now they don't make it as easy. And so basically the link for the search page is, this wonderfully easy URL. In order to sort of easily find the QPublic now, you basically have to do qpublic.schneidercorp.com and then go to this page, enter the state and the county, and then click on property search, and that'll bring it back to that search page that I just showed, where you can then search for the property. Once you pull up the property, basically it has all the property information on one page. You just kind of scroll down to look at it. But the biggest problem with QPublic right now is that they don't have the 2022 information because they are no longer the official website for the for Fulton assessors. They've now gone to the fultonassessor.org website. They no longer have the most updated information. They probably will get it eventually, but for right now they don't have it. They do have the 2021 sales, and this is where QPublic can be really helpful. You can actually just click a button. You basically put in the date range, and then you click a button for sales by neighborhood, and it comes up with a list of sales by neighborhood. You can also do the sales search, which gives you the option of limiting it in different ways. But for the most part, the sales by neighborhood works. So, it's a great resource. It comes up with a list. Now, it does not give you a lot of the great information that you get in the advanced search download, but it does give you some information, and you can download it as an Excel spreadsheet and sort it and do all of that. The other thing that it does that the Excel spreadsheet and advanced search doesn't do is it gives you upfront the sales validity information. So when you're talking about sales, you want to try and find ones that are, a valid sale or qualified, because the tax office basically already agrees that these are valid fair market value sales. But there are some that are marked as unqualified or invalid based on what they perceive as not being a fair market transaction. So for example, you can see here that a sale conveyed by administrator of an estate is unqualified. Well, if the administrator of the estate is actually selling it to a third party, they have a fiduciary responsibility to get as much as they can for the property. So that could still be a fair market value. That could be, basically fair market value is just the arm's length transaction between a knowledgeable buyer and a knowledgeable seller. That's it. So these are arm's length transactions. This could be a valid sale. This could be something that could be used as a comp, but you want to be careful. You don't want to rely on a sale that they're going to contest and that you don't really have a good basis for justifying why it should be considered a fair market value. Now, the FultonAssessor.org website does have this information. It's just not in the advanced search. So you have to kind of look for it. So if you go to the sales tab for the property and look at the different sales, you can actually see the sales validity information down at the bottom here. And if you need to go to, for the example, this one had 2 2021 sales. You use the arrow to go to the next one. And so you can see that this one they consider a valid sale. Obviously, the one that's for 0, they had it as not valid because it's a transaction for less than $1,000. So that's the way you check the sales validity when you're looking at what comps to do. And you want to use the valid or qualified sales if you can find them. If you can't, take a look at the reason. Again, one of the reasons they often have is that it was renovated after the sale. Well, that's a good argument for why that property should be valued differently the following year. Rather than valuing it for the sales price, it should be valued for that improved price. But it's not a great argument for saying that that's not a fair market value sale. That the sale, probably was a sale for a property as is, and that's a fair market value. And often that's much more comparable to the sale that our clients are going to have than when after it was renovated and flipped. That sale is not going to be anything like our client's house because our client hasn't had those renovations done. And so, there's arguments to be made that some of these things that are marked as invalid should be considered the fair market value for our client's home. Another one that's common now is that it was sold to or from a wholesaler. Well, it's still an arm's length transaction between a willing buyer and a willing seller. So arguably it's fair market value. We do know that they're trying to buy on the cheap, but isn't that true of pretty much every buyer? So there's an argument. If you can get the qualified or valid sales, great. But if there's an argument, you can also use some of these others. You can talk with the client about other evidence they might be able to dig up on their own, like recent appraisals. If they had an appraisal that showed a lower value, that's a great piece of evidence. If they have, or if the appraisal shows that some of the information is incorrect in the tax assessor's information, that can be helpful. If they have an appraisal for more than the value in the notice of assessment, they may not want to use that. I would encourage them not to use that. Photographs of any property conditions can be really, really helpful. So, if they have any condition issues, talk to them about go ahead and get pictures, get pictures now before you get it fixed so that you have the evidence to show that this is the way it was on January 1st. Repair estimates, if you were going to sell your house, the buyer would be, giving you a price that subtracts out the cost that they're going to incur by fixing up some of these things. So, you can definitely make the argument that the repair estimate should be subtracted from the value. Google Street View and internet searches can help you with distinguishing some of the sales. In looking at the sales, if there's a property that's been flipped, I've often used Street View to show that, hey, the way that house looked before the sale, looking on the Google timeline, it was much more like my house when it sold than it is now. So, those can be sort of good things for the client to work on their own. These aren't things that you're going to need to work on with them right now. So just the words of caution, beware of frozen values. again, for uniformity, you're probably not going to get very far putting down properties that were appealed in 2020, because they're going to say those aren't current values. They're actually 2020 values that have a freeze. Avoid uninhabitable properties unless the client's property is uninhabitable. You're just going to have a hard time arguing that a value that your client's home should be valued lower based on a home that's falling in. Try to use valid or qualified sales, but be ready to justify if you don't. And then, make sure the client understands that affordability is not grounds for lowering the value. They really do need to find some hook to hang their hat on, something to say that this is why it should be lower. Just a quick, this is what the appraiser is probably going to be coming in with. So they're going to have, 4 or 5 comps. The sales they're going to set out what the sale information was, and compare it to the value that they have for the client. For uniformity, they're going to set out 4 or 5 homes that they've assessed that are of similar value. That they're going to try and make the argument that that they were correct, and so you want to try and give the client something that they can use to combat that. Okay. So that's the end of my piece of the training. Okay, stop here. Are there questions on any of that?
Yes, a couple, and I will show a live example for the pre-research folks. Do you know if there's a way to filter out frozen properties? I would love to know if that was the case as well.
There is not, unfortunately. If a value looks like it's too good to be true, it often is. So that's usually the first thing I do. The way you can check to see if it's a frozen value is go to the appeals history for that property. It's one of the tabs, and you can look to see if there is an appeal registered for 2020 or 2021. Another thing, sort of a shortcut, is when you're looking initially at the property, if you go to values history and you see that it has the last 2 or 3 values are exactly the same, odds are good that's frozen. So usually what I'll do is I'm gathering what the values are anyways. So I'm looking at that. If I see that red flag, I'll look at the appeals history and confirm whether or not that's an appeal or not. But yeah, I mean, that's so basically when you're doing when you're looking at the pre-research, you can look at those individual properties and kind of get a sense of if there's something squirrely going on.
Yep, I'm about to show all of you that real quick. So let me share my screen here. So I'm going to go through an example really quick of someone that registered for Saturday's session. So I already did kind of some of the research for you guys. So this is the Fulton Assessor website. And real quick, I'll just look at their property, which is 2825 Allegro. I would recommend, if you can, to have a second screen. It makes it a lot easier when you're doing these. And the Fulton Assessor's website is such a joy to work with, so you may get error notes. Okay. All right, so this is the main residential card that you'll see for the client. Here you'll see the neighborhood code, which is what the main thing you'll use to search by, and all the owner information. What Stacy was just talking about, if you go to values history here on the side, you can see the current year value. This one property had many years of the same value, so that may be something that you want to see if it was a frozen value. Because of an appeal, you can go over to appeals history, and it would give more detail if it was an appeal. This may have just been, honestly, I don't know why it was that price for so many years. They just got lucky, I guess.
It's because they didn't change the values from before the bubble until just after the bubble.
That's when we started doing classes. So you'll see it's pretty clear. You'll have 3 years in a row, and that's how you'll notice that it is a frozen value. So what I typically do when I'm doing pre-research is I will have a client's home on one tab with their residential card up where I can see their year built, square footage, bedrooms, bathrooms, you know, their grade and CDU. That's just easier to me as I flip back and forth, and I'll pull up another tab for when I pull the research. So doing that, you'll go to advanced search. Stacy went through this pretty in depth, so I won't go through it again, but just so you can see it live, you'll just type in the 1481. I don't know if you have a bad memory like I do. You'll add search. And like Stacy was saying, you really want to add either the sales date if you're doing the values argument, which would be all of 2021, which was last year. Typically, I like to add, you know, either sales price, square footage, appraised values for the uniformity argument, anything that helps filter it down, because you'll not be able to pull, you know, 1,800 records. So once you get from there, you'll get an exported spreadsheet. Make sure you save it as an Excel document, not a CSV, unless you have a computer that's not as quirky as mine. Mine doesn't save all the highlights when I have it as an Excel document. So what you all will do is you'll get these spreadsheets and you'll go and find good comp properties by referring to the spreadsheet and to the Fulton Assessor's website. And just real quick, when you're done with those, sorry, I had this pulled out, but I had to change internet, so it changed. So I have sent, or I will be sending you guys a Google folder, and you'll upload all of the properties to that Google folder once you're done finding comps. You'll see here it's sorted by day. You'll make a client folder and drop those in by their appraised and values argument with the highlighted properties, which is what I'm going to show you now. So here's our client home. I highlight that one in yellow. If it doesn't pull when you do your export, you may have to add it in manually, which is what I did, which is why you have some blanks. I just added in the most important things for the appeal. You'll want to do your price per square foot, which is just simple math. You divide either your appraised total by your square footage, enter, drag it down. If you're doing the values argument, you'll do the same thing, except for you'll do the sales price divided by the square foot and do that. So pretty much in any case, you want to make sure that your comp property is lower than your client home. Sometimes that can be very difficult. So then you'll just want to really refer to some of the other properties. It kind of just depends. So here's our client home. You'll see it has 105 appraised value per square footage. And we have a couple of good properties that I've identified here. You can see this one is actually more expensive, but because there weren't a lot of comps, I felt like maybe it was relevant to include this one as well. If you have this case, you just want to keep it in mind for your opinion of value. You just want to keep it in line, you know, within the realm of possibility for the BOE hearing. So looking at this example that I marked in gray, I'll look this one up real quick and you'll see why it was a bad example. Again, I had a bad memory. 2841. So you'll see here, this was not a good comp because it was a frozen value. So like Stacey was saying, you cannot use that as a good comp. But if you look at this other property that I highlighted in green here, it was built a similar year as our client home, similar bed, bathroom size, similar square footage, similar grade, and it was appraised less than our client's home. So that would be a good comp to use in your argument. And so again, this is for the uniformity argument when looking up comps. And that's just one example. I'm trying to move quick so we can get to questions. And then moving over to the values argument, you kind of do the same thing when you go through the advanced search. You just want to make sure you have the sales date instead of your appraised values and some of the other search criteria. You'll pull your spreadsheet and do it by sales price per square footage. And again, it's really the same process. You want to find properties that are less. So this one we look at 620 Hamilton. You'll just want to make sure that it was a bona fide transaction, like Stacy was saying. Again, similar year built. This one's a little older, a little smaller. Values typically are the harder argument with just how the sales market can be. But again, you just want to find similar properties, age, size, bedrooms, CDU, and make sure that they were a qualified sale. So I'll just look that one up real quick so you can see what that looks like. So Stacy, this may be a good example. So it was sold for this from a, we'll get a lot of these remodeled, changed after sales. So do you want to make any notes on if we want to consider that a value or sorry, a qualified sale or not?
I mean, maybe what you can do is add a column to the spreadsheet that says, sales validity, like just, after the price per square foot. And just, you can leave it blank if it's a valid one, but if it's like remodeled, changed after sale, just put that in there just so that when you're talking with the client, you can say, hey, we think that this is probably a valid sale because it's probably more like your property. And the client may know, these are homes in their neighborhood, so they may know the home and they may know that, yeah, it was more like my home when it was sold.
Yeah, so the ones that are really going to be not considered a valid sale, you'll see that it was like a $0 sale. A lot of the transfer deeds will be like that. Or if like a wholesaler investor bought a bunch, usually those are lower prices. And then once you're done, highlight some of the good comps if you want to highlight some that maybe aren't the best, so the person can remember. Like I did here with the gray one, just noting that was a frozen value, and then you'll upload them into their respective folders, which you guys will create. I know I sent over some of the people we have signed up right now, so you guys should have a fair amount to do. And then when you're actually at the session, volunteers will just be able to refer back to this based on the client that they're seeing and say, hey, these are our good comp properties. We can include those in the appeal statement. So that is it in a nutshell. Any questions?
I just want to, my name is Carrie. I'm also at Atlanta Legal Aid with Stacy. I just want to add in that I feel like when I was first learning this, it felt overwhelming, but you really do. It's a bit of a learning curve at the beginning, and then you really do get used to it, and it becomes a lot faster. Like now I can review a lot of comps pretty quickly because I just got used to the system.
Yes, and we'll have a step-by-step guide that I'll send over if I haven't already. Yeah, are there any questions in the chat? I unpinned my taskbar, so now I can't access any of the Zoom controls. Do you see any, Carrie or Stacy?
Oh, there's not any new ones after the filtering out frozen properties one.
Okay. Well, again, thank you guys all for volunteering. This is really important, especially for those that are doing the pre-research. It saves us a bunch of time. And it is fairly easy once you do your first one. I promise you'll get the hang of it. It's just doing research and clicking through on tabs. But of course, if you guys have any questions, you know where to find me. And I'll send out this recording and the step-by-step guide so you guys all have it in just a moment. And if there are no questions, we will see you guys at your respective volunteer dates. Thank you so much.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Have a good day.